Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and today on Mages, Sages, and Seers, I am proud to bring you The Enchanted Self with Dr. Barbara Becker Holstein. Greetings and welcome, Barbara. How are you this evening?
Oh, good. And thank you for letting us find a way into this mystical gateway of enchantment and friendship one more time. It's lovely. So I think you were going to leave me with my dear friend Doreen Lapperton Addison, who's my guest tonight. And we're going to search for you maybe once in a while. Uh,
Awesome. I will be here enjoying your show as always.
okay. Very good. So Doreen, welcome to my show. We've done
Thank you, Barbara.
so many things together over the years, so many times. From being on the show in New York City when it was in the building where also all the firemen had their, I guess, their offices. I'm not exactly sure what really happened in that building, but there were a lot of firemen, and I guess maybe they belonged to clubs, or I'm not sure, but they were there. And then the studio, maybe there was more than one studio there. So that was just the beginning, or in between, a long, long friendship that is still going on. And I thought today that we could look at some of the material and the things that have happened to ourselves and discuss the emotional and the reality issues that come out of some of the things that we have to deal with in life. So one of the things that we dealt with together, although I would say, I wish I had got some of the copies of our newsletters that we wrote, because we had some great stories, but we'll have to leave that for another show. But this little book, Recipes for Enchantment, The Secret Ingredient is You, we pondered, and many times you were helpful as I put it together, and you had a story in it. And I have many stories in it. Also, many other people contributed. But I thought we could start off. There's one little story that I don't know, for some reason, I seem to gravitate to it. And it's about ancient history, really. It's something that happened way in the past. And let's see if I can find it. The hat pin. So I'll start off by sharing some of this hat pin story. And there are some questions that I developed around it that I think are interesting because they touch on different aspects. So this is from the 12th century. And wouldn't it be nice if we could really know what it was like to live in the 12th century? It's just so fascinating to think that people were there, and we'll just never know their history. But this history was recorded, so we know it. Rabbi Akiva lived during the 12th century and was considered one of the great scholars and leaders in Judaism. He had a daughter, and on the day she was born, a soothsayer told him that she would die on her wedding day, bitten on the arm by a poisonous snake. This was as tragic as a fate as anyone could have imagined. Raising a daughter while worrying that you will lose her on what should be the most beautiful day of her life. Rabbi Akiva decided not to believe the soothsayer, although he certainly thought about what she had said. But he trusted God, So he proceeded to make arrangements for his daughter's wedding. A proper suitor was found, and the wedding day was coming. The daughter knew nothing of the strange prophecy, but she did have a terrible headache that day. Finally, unable to bear the headdress she was wearing, she took it off and she stuck it, the large hat, she took it off and absently stuck the large hat pin that held it into the edge of a curtain in her bedroom. Immediately, shaking and hissing sounds seemed to emanate from behind the curtain, but the daughter had already left the room. The marriage ceremony took place as scheduled, followed by a day celebration and feast. And indeed, to Rabbi Akiva's great relief, his daughter remained alive and well. The next day, the daughter remembered the hat pin and sent a servant to retrieve it from the curtain. As he wrenched it free, to his amazement, the servant heard a loud thud. It is as if something had fallen to the floor. Upon investigation, he discovered a poisonous dead snake on the floor behind the curtain. It bore a fatal wound along its side, apparently from being stabbed by the daughter's hat pin. And my first question was, how can you relate to this story? I'll ask it to both of you. Any thoughts? I can tell you what came to me. That'll maybe
Start with that, and then
it'll churn you to help you get going. I remember my ballet teacher predicted to my mother that I would be too tall to become a professional dancer. Her prediction crushed my dreams in an instant. Now I would never become a professional dancer. I put aside my toe shoes and stifled my dreams. How ironic, given the fact that by the time I was an adult, many professional dancers were in my height of 5'8" or even taller. So then I asked, can you think of a time when a prediction got you in trouble? Perhaps you became frightened or gave up on something. Or did you ever feel protected or saved from harm, as Rabbi Akiva's daughter was from a disaster? Can you tell the story? And lastly, have you ever been able to override a prediction given to you by sheer prayer or belief in yourself? Can you tell us?
I have a story that came to mind. Speaking of dance, many years ago, I had a bicycle accident, and I now have 2 screws and a pin in my ankle. And I'll just say overall, because of that injury, I've been led to do some amazing body work and led to people that I would have never met if I wasn't in search of a quest for better movement, more efficient movement. And it's led me truly into what I've been doing today if it wasn't for that accident. And another thing that brought to mind was that when I was dancing, at the time I had a dance partner, we were doing shows, and again I had the 2 screws and pin, and this ballet teacher said to me, you'll never dance. Why do you, and I had a doctor, the physician, say, why do you want to dance? You should be just happy and lucky that you're walking at this point. And this teacher's telling me, you're not going to be good enough to dance. Well, many years later, I'm still dancing, and that one ballet teacher, she saw me perform, and she came up to me and said, you are a beautiful dancer. And, just goes to show if you persevere and you believe, and sometimes the unknown or things that we encounter in our lives bring us to more fulfillment.
Right.
Yeah.
awesome. I have a story like that too. one of many. I think I've been told so many times by so many people that I'm never going to do what I wound up doing. But this one actually ties into how I met Barbara. I decided one day that I would have a TV show. I didn't know anything about getting a TV show, what I do on a TV show, or, but I just decided I would do it. So normally when I decide something like that, I get a notebook. Usually I'll buy a new notebook, even though I have a stack of notebooks on the side of my desk. But I'll buy a new one just for the new dream. And then I'll just write down whatever comes into my head. So this is something that I'd forgotten until recently. The whole memory came back to me in meditation. But actually, long before I met Barbara, and I'd forgotten this by the time I met Barbara, her book, The Enchanted Self, was on a list of people I'd like to have on my show if I had a show. But anyway, so I wrote down who I would have on the show, what the show would be about, what my role in the show was, and just kept writing. And nothing happened for like a year and a half. And in the meanwhile, as I shared my dream, people told me, "Oh, you can't do a television show. You're not an actor. You never studied journalism. You never did this. You never did that." But I've learned in life that you don't have to know what you're doing. Just decide to do it and move forward, and keep your ears and your eyes open, and be careful of who comes into your world. And they either have something positive to contribute or something that's going to try to hold you back. So I try to go to the more positive people that will encourage me to go forward. So anyway, I was writing things and they were being published in low circulation magazines at the time. And I wrote an article on UFOs. And normally when I wrote something on UFOs or cryptids, people would comment. They'd write letters or try to contact me. And this time it didn't happen. Nobody was interested, I guess, in what I wrote, except for one person who called me, May Eisenberg. And she said she read my article on UFOs and incarnate extraterrestrials, and she'd love to interview me on her show. Would I be interested? So, of course, I was interested. And the only other times I've been on TV or in the paper was during those where they stop you on the street and ask you your opinion. So that had happened to me, but I never like had my own show or anything or been on a show. So I went down there. I went there early, and May was in a tizzy, and I didn't really know her. She didn't know me, and I asked her what was wrong, and she said that Jenny Jones scarfed up her co-host, and her co-host was Dr. Jean Cirillo, and she had been going on Jenny Jones, and then I guess Jenny Jones offered her a permanent position on the show. So May didn't have somebody to do a show with. So she turned to me and asked me, "Can you do a show?" So I'd never done one before, but I had perfect confidence that I could do one if given the opportunity. So I said, "Sure, I could do a show." So she asked me if I'd mind being her like guest host if she wasn't able to do a show, and then her co-host while she was there. So I said, "Sure, I'll do that." And the hard part was keeping track of where the camera lights were. So for the first couple of years, I was looking in all sorts of weird directions while I was talking. But that's how I met Barbara, because Barbara was one of the other guest hosts um, and like permanent hosts. And so we became friends, and then we started doing shows together. And we did some really interesting shows. They were very cutting edge. They were very different. Like one time I was doing something, and I was taking over and planting my flag in other people's shows. I don't know if you remember that. So so I was aiming for all the shows that were adjacent to me, and we had like a map. And so we did shows like that. Barbara did a really great show with a chef from a chef school, and we had food and psychology, and it was just a really great combination of things. So,
Yes,
had I listened to the voices that told me I can't do it because of this and that, I never would have experienced all those wonderful things.
absolutely. Really, that was one of the most special times in my life, was falling into meeting you, and the opportunities that May gave us as just,
Mhm.
she was really an elderly woman
Yes.
who I don't even think had perfect health. I think things were an effort for her, but she just kept on going and kept on training us and um, helping, with providing these shows through public television. Yeah.
And we're
I
still
was,
here doing it today. So it's a tribute to May. And
I know.
those are special times for me as well.
Yeah, yeah. I think that one of the things I got from this story before we leave it is the sense that very often someone else saves you. In this case, a father kept from his daughter, this information from a mystic that could have really made her crippled in life, to think something's going to happen to me, what day will it be kind of thing. So he never told her. And that reminds me of one of my favorite mini stories that involves my father and me, where when I graduated from Barnard College, then I went on to get a master's in teaching. So I had considered myself extremely fortunate because I got into Harvard's School of Education, and I was, I guess, young enough and naive enough to consider that very special, that I had proved that whatever went through my head, I'm intelligent, I'm gonna have a future, blah, blah, blah. And I went up to the college and I had lived in a dormitory for a month or so. And what happened is they bused us, or we got groups of young adults together, and we took cabs or somebody drove, and we went to a couple of public schools, and we were summer teachers in training. It was very nice for 3 or 4 weeks. I met people my own age or a little older. We had to prepare lesson plans at night. It was, one of these innocuous, pleasant experiences until the day that the man who was the director of the program, and my hunch was he was a dean at Harvard, came and pulled myself out of the classroom and 4 other people. There were 5 of us pulled away from the kids. And we went to some sort of office, and he said, none of you can stay. None of you are good enough to stay. You're not able to discipline the kids well enough, and you have to leave. And I was so stupid. I said, but I have my sweater in the classroom. He said, you can't get it. So stupid. So we were in shock. He said, you can come back in the fall and still do this year of training, but you've got to leave now. So the 5 of us rented a taxi. We drove back to Cambridge. I don't remember a single one of those people. I wouldn't even recognize them, but we were all in shock. And my mother had to drive up to Boston and get me. And it was hard for her, and she did it. And I came home, I was sobbing. And the next day, I'll say the next day, it might have been 2 days later, I was sitting at the kitchen table, still crying on and off, and my mother and father were there. And my father said, okay, this is what's going to happen. You're going to go and be interviewed by other schools of education. You're going to get on the train tomorrow or the next day, and you're going to go to these places and see what you like. I'm sure most of them will accept you, and you're just going to go to a different school. And there was when my father, when he was that definitive, that was it. If I thought I was going to sit in my bedroom and eat chocolates, no way. I was getting on that train. And I took a train to Philadelphia, and I went to a college there. He organized all these visits because he was, at that time, a superintendent of schools, and he had a lot of contacts. So I didn't go in cold, but anyway, I went to Philadelphia. I don't even remember the name of the college. I went to Rhode Island. I went back to Massachusetts. And after 4 or 5 interviews, and yes, I did get in, I think, to all of them, I chose Boston University because the person who interviewed me was just so darn nice. And he made me feel like I had come home, that kind of person. So I went to Boston University and it changed my future for the good. I loved my training there, and it led to me being a teacher, me being a psychologist. I think even entering the film world, all these things that eventually happened in one way or another. But the end of the story is that when I was in my 50s, I was sitting in the kitchen with my father, and it was toward, he was 30 years older than me, so he was no chicken, but, he was still totally lucid and everything. And he said, by the way, you might be interested to know that I was so angry and really concerned about this dean who would do that to you and the other young people. I called him and I spoke to him at length, and he said to me, tell your daughter to not become a teacher because she doesn't have what it takes. And I chose to never tell you because I knew you'd be a good teacher.
Wow.
So
And you're still a great teacher.
thank you. So, there are people around us that keep us going. Do you want to tell or read from the same book a little bit of what you wrote years ago?
Yeah, and I think it lends itself, it's short. So this is back, well, it has to do with the summer of 1997. I'm not sure when I actually wrote this, but it must have been after the summer of 1997. I'll just read it. It's called A Familiar Friend. Caught up in the hustle and bustle of everyday life, I realize that it's been a long while since I've spent an extended period of time with a familiar friend, myself. Living often lends itself to excuses for not catching up with old acquaintances. The summer of 1997 was great, the best in years. I've deposited in my personal memory bank enchanted recollections of going to the beach, swimming, hiking, taking day trips to museums and the zoo, and spending quality time with family and friends. But the summer also summoned anxiety and restlessness on a deep personal level. During this time, I returned my focus to Tai Chi. I hadn't practiced it for about a year and a half. When I stopped, I knew that I would resume at some point. As time went on, though, I found myself worrying about all I had forgotten, which made it harder for me to begin again. But a dancer's mind also resides in her body. Some people refer to this as muscle memory. When I first began practicing, I was a little rusty, but found myself moving nonetheless. After a few weeks, I met with Peter Eno, my Tai Chi instructor and friend. With Peter, I realized how much I missed this type of movement and the physical and emotional and spiritual pleasure I derived from it. Establishing time for practice required that my whole family adjusted to its schedule. Initially, I practiced in the house, trying to create a peaceful environment among people whose needs sometimes conflicted with mine. This proved difficult. I would imagine my husband thinking, "What is she up to now?" while my daughter was shouting, "Where's mommy?" But I continued. I couldn't deny that moving again made me breathe more deeply and feel both more relaxed and alert. Though this wasn't a formal dance class, I was maintaining my flexibility by working on balance and other subtle movement patterns. One morning, I found myself thinking I should go outside and practice. I still remember gazing through the multicolored leaves at the bluer than blue sky. Since then, I've practiced outdoors every morning, regardless of the weather. Why? My answer is simple, because it is exhilarating. My senses have become more attuned. Moving in this way enables me to reconnect with a friend, myself. Through my practice, I am learning how to maintain my focus on the present moment. I am also reminded of my love of learning and of nature and of the importance of movement in my life. With childlike wonder, I watch spiders spinning their webs, feel the sunshine on my skin, listen to the wind, and notice the squirrels, flowers, trees, and vegetables while smelling the fragrant air. My memories ebb and flow from past to present, creating the positive links that ground and support me as I continue to grow and change. My restlessness and anxiety have decreased. I now look forward to each morning when I move, sometimes like a dancer and sometimes not, tuning myself to the rhythms within and without. Welcome back, old friend. It's good to be on intimate terms again. So,
Nice. I like that.
yeah.
Beautifully
So
written.
I think that's been a residing theme through my life, or at least since I wrote about it in 1997. Um, uh, the idea, the theme of coming back to oneself, and that how many times I've been pushed away from myself because of extenuating circumstances, family obligation, etc., so not wanting to be with myself, um, and not, and yet every time I come back to myself, give myself the time, it's like so refreshing and intimate and exhilarating and healing. Um, and it ebb and flows. You get caught up in the hustle and bustle, you come back. You get caught up, you come back. And it's a reminder, always a reminder that I can come home to myself.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I'm thinking for me, I often feel the happiest when I'm writing. And particularly if I'm working on some form of a novel or something like that. And I do think that that attachment to writing a story goes way back to when I was 9 years old and started to keep a diary. Now, my diary was very superficial because I wouldn't have dared to put anything in it that, I don't know, had any depth. I wouldn't have understood what that meant, so for 3 years, I kept a diary that was something like, Dear Diary, today I went to school and my father gave me a ride. I forgot my lunch and my mother dropped it off. I came home later and practiced my violin, and then I went outside on my bicycle and we're going to go see grandma in Boston. No, that could have been the whole thing, but somehow just keeping those process notes of my life, even though there was absolutely no depth, there was no mention that my parents would occasionally fight, that I might have gotten in trouble when I lost my umbrella, nothing, nothing. But still, I think it started my training toward being a writer. So I think a lot of things that establish us happen, as we're growing up, and then we keep taking them back if we can.
Right. Right. Yes.
Yeah.
And it's a constant reminder because, we cannot, well, we can choose to be with ourselves. And it goes deeper than that, not just doing things, but choose to be with ourselves as we move through the world. And that's an important lesson, just to be your authentic self as you move and engage with others. It's a constant lesson.
Yeah. Yeah.
And not
And that's where, oh, go ahead.
No, is it just not getting pulled, just having enough confidence and staying grounded, even in times of pressure or, when you have to be out in the world, you could still be out there with yourself,
Exactly.
yourself, your friend, you.
And I think one of the really difficulties of staying in a marriage is that very often what to me would be myself is not to Russell what would be himself. You know, so if you want to be yourselves together, it's very hard. I remember when we were first married, we went into an ice cream parlor. And I think we must have embarrassed ourselves, but we were so young, we didn't even realize it. We wanted to share one ice cream sundae, and we could not agree on either the flavor or the topping.
Oh my God.
You know, and it was really making us angrier and angrier because we're newlyweds, you know, newlyweds are supposed to have this harmony around them, you know? But the truth is that to stay yourself is very difficult many times. Either, you know, if you're with a partner, they have different, as I said, a different sense of what the self is going to be. Or even if you're just with friends or alone, sometimes it's not easy to do what you thought you could do, or, you know, circumstances get in the way so you can't do it. It's very, very complex, but the enchanted self is at its core recognizing your better talents and potential, just what you're talking about, you know, and keeping it and getting it back again.
And not even knowing. So as you're talking about a marriage or any relationship or with friends or your work, I mean, if one chooses to evolve and deepen one's practices and sense of self, these things they already exist within us. It's just to bring it out. And then when people aren't used to you being that way, your way, you know, your own, they only know you as they know you, it can be very disconcerting. Like then
Yeah,
people
right.
recognize you one way. Um, just a light point of view, and and this is just a very surface. But as I travel, and you do too, Barbara, and probably yourself, Hercules, as you travel from group to group, people know you as a member of that group. They don't know the whole you. Or
Sure.
so if I'm doing, you know, when I used to do a lot of ballroom competition and stuff like that, they knew, you know, those people knew me as a ballroom dancer, but the people that I did modern dance with and danced in a company, they would know me as that. And then other people would know me as a mother, but they didn't know me about all the other avenues of who you are that make you who you are. You know, so it's like little sections, little slices of you, but very few people know the whole roundedness. And I will say, I don't know if this sounds morbid or not, but the times that I've been to funerals and I hear people get up and speak about the person, I'm very sad that the person has passed, but it's not even a but. And I do enjoy the stories because a family member could get up and speak, an old friend could get up and see somebody that they worked with, and you start getting a broader, rounder picture of who this person really was and how this person meant so much to so many people in so many walks of life, you know, where you don't often get that opportunity. So,
No, you don't.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. That's an interesting point. Yeah.
I found as I get older that the divisions between different roles that I play in life and the person that people see as I fulfill that particular role, it matters less and less that I be role appropriate.
Right.
So I'm involved in local politics, I'm involved in local education, I'm involved in lots of different conventional type of things. Yet everybody knows that I have an extensive knowledge of UFOs and I investigate cryptids and, you know, I do all sorts of things with Greek mythology. So that's become common knowledge. And I found that as long as I don't beat anybody up over the head with whatever my particular focus is, people are willing to just accept you as you are. And so I found that because very a lot of people like know me from like the UFO philosophies that I focus on in my lectures. You know, they also find out later that like I'm on the county committee and I've been elected there and stuff like that. So it takes them a little while to reconcile what they think I should be like in these roles and beyond these roles. But once people know me, it's just, this is who I am, this is what I do, and regardless of what roles I'm expected to play or chosen to play in my life, that I am who I am beyond these roles, you know, and that a lot of these roles aren't really necessary to living your life or you're enjoying your existence. So those can be dropped and, you know.
Yes. That's when you become, in my opinion, more attuned to who you really are and can move through these different roles with authenticity and just be who you are in all these different places. Let's put it that way. So,
Yeah,
That's a good point. And again, I've noticed that at funerals also, or in gatherings where somebody's no longer around, that people know sides of the person that they've never shown to people who are in other aspects of their lives or with whom they play a different role. And that it's really surprising and shocking sometimes to hear these stories because it's like, is this the same person?
right.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to find another little story, and I'm laughing as I open this book. This is a book I helped my mother put together in her last years. It's her stories from her birth to her later years. And I'm sort of looking for one, but I already started to laugh with a different one. Just check for a second. Well, let me read some of this one. It's called The Movies. When I was a small child, I watched many movies in the theater in Roxbury, that's Massachusetts. It was located close to Eagleton Square, which was bustling with activities and safe years ago. The Shawmont was more than a movie house. It was a community center, a second home, a retreat, a social gathering place, and of course, an entertainment facility. It allowed parents to get a few hours away from their children, as long as they had someone responsible to take their kids to the Saturday matinee. Tickets were either 5 or 10 cents each. There was no food or drink sold in the neighborhood theaters when I was 5 years old, but there usually was a confectionery store nearby where you could purchase a generous amount of candy for a nickel. What could be more satisfying than your sweet tooth as you sat patiently through the news, laughed aloud at the cartoons, and intently watched the main attraction and important cliffhanger that made you want to return the following week? I walked along with my 2 older brothers, who were threatened with horrible punishment if they neglected to take good care of their little sister. It wasn't my fault that on the way I managed, only knows how, to swallow a fairly large buzzing fly. I screamed as it tickled in my throat, its wings beating in protest. Finally, it slid down. I wanted to go home to tell my mother what had happened, but my brothers didn't want to do that. They were thoughtful enough to assure me that flies were not bad and actually were good for you as long as you didn't consume too many. Little Bernice swallowed that bull along with the fly. We entered the large, imposing building of our weekend retreat and found seats. I sat between Arnold and Howard as always. Mom said that that was the safest way. But what happened if I needed to go to the bathroom? They couldn't take me. My mother told me I could go if it was an emergency, and we would have to ask a lady or older girl whom we knew would take me. I realize now that on Saturdays, I was given very few fluids until I got home. Then I was urged to drink a lot to help the dehydration I had been subjected to. We were surrounded by familiar family-friendly faces. I waved to my neighbors. We were all in a jovial mood, anticipating a wonderful afternoon. There was chatter and laughter. Occasionally, an usher would come around to shush people to warn us we'd have to leave if we couldn't behave. To me, an usher was like a policeman. I didn't dare misbehave. I love that time. We had one bag of candy, which we shared. I was happy and engrossed in a funny Charlie Chaplin film. Suddenly, something hard hit my chest. I was frightened. I poked Arnold and asked him if I were bleeding. I told him maybe someone shot me. He whispered, "Are you crazy? What are you talking about?" I felt around, no blood. Then my shaky fingers fished out an object. Even in the dark, from the size and shape, I could tell it was a 50-cent piece. It probably had fallen from the balcony above us, and to me, it was a real windfall. I did feel sorry for the person who lost it, though. I asked my brothers if I could call out, "Did anyone lose 50 cents? They told me, "Don't you dare, everyone will say they did." We just had to keep it, and without guilt. After hours of being entertained, we headed for home, but first we stopped at the little store. My brothers had convinced me that I should share my fortune with them. After all, they brought me every week. We were able to get 3 large bags of our favorite penny candy. We walked along, partaking of the goodies. I chewed a couple of chocolate-covered caramels that I favored, which was probably one of the reasons I had trouble with my gums years later. I left a generous portion for my parents. My brothers ate all of theirs. My parents became angry with them because they had very little appetite for the tasty meal my mom had prepared, and they were properly punished. But my mother and father praised their little darling for being kind and willing to share. That's just such a sweet story of wholesome life, you know. And I think for me, my whole life has been a journey to find wholesome people and be connected in a kind of family friendship way. And it hasn't been really an easy journey. For me, it's had a lot of unfulfillment and fulfillment. But a lot of the, I think the pandemic, and to some extent, some of the years right before the pandemic, when social media came around and stuff, I think has made it harder and harder to feel that comfort that my mother was talking about, to just be easily in a community and feeling the safety and the connection with enough people. I think you've done a very good job at that, Hercules.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate. I have lots of people, including yourself, who are part of my network of people, and with me doing something together, like some project or some activity in the community. That's what typifies most of my relationships. And you and I have done a lot of artistic and healing type of work over the years.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and so have I with Doreen. You are two of my closest friends in my life that understand a lot of my work, and we've done a lot of things together. But I think in terms of that friendship and connection that goes with, you know, the cousins when you're growing up and the neighbors that really know you, and the safety of certain places you know you could go if you had to. That's kind of fragile, you know. For me, particularly having lost relatives and friends in the last few years, you know, it's just a journey that I'm still on. Yeah.
You know, there's many years ago, I was reading these books by Edward T. Hall. I don't know if he was an anthropologist, a social, whatever, commentator, but one thing, well, many things, but one thing that stuck out, he said, for every invention, positive invention that we have, there's something taken away. So, you know, the social media you pointed out. I mean, what a wonderful way. It opened up a worldwide communication, but in the meantime, it has severed us from smaller communities, and like you're saying, it just changed. You know, everything from you know, our transportation. You know, the trains, the highways. You know, families move away from one another. So for every positive invention, we do have the downside of what that means to us.
But I do think that the core to having enough people in your life is what Hercules is saying in offering yourself and doing different things with different people. And I think, Doreen, by the natural way that you've lived between your dance and teaching Sunday school and so on, you also have developed a lot of that, you know?
And my horse world that I live
Oh,
in.
that's right. I don't know if Hercules knows that Doreen has a horse.
Oh, wow, that is awesome.
It is.
So, yes, the horse was originally my daughter's, but the horse has been mine for many, many years, and I took up horseback riding in my later life, and it's proven to be both therapeutic, sanctuary, and just a whole host of learning and just wonderful. But with that, yes, it's another community of horse people, you know, and it's a whole nother world. And again, it's one of those it's a community, and really, we don't really know about each other beyond this horse community too much. Sometimes we find out, but it's just another wonderful, like you said, it's the communities, the smaller communities.
Yes, yes.
And
I know.
sometimes that's enough, just knowing people in that particular area. I have one of my interests is those sword and sandal movies, they call them, or Hercules movies that were very popular in the 60s for people who are in that age group. Now you can see them on DVD or sometimes on late night TV. But I started a small group and then on Facebook, and then started a few other groups to expand that one group. And now all told, there's like 35,000 people who share that interest globally,
Oh,
just communicating with each other and posting pictures from the collections or thoughts about movies they grew up with. And again, none of us, well, a few of them I know better, but most of them I don't. But still, just the fact that we're gathered together from all over the planet, and regardless of what our religious or political opinions might happen to be, or our backgrounds might be, we share a passion for those movies. So it is a great thing.
It is, it is.
yeah, that's great. Yeah, very interesting. Very, very interesting. What the things that we know about, and things that we are still working on, no matter what our age is, you know, and it's okay to be working on things. I think
Mhm.
it's good actually to be working on things. I know in this, we sold our house and we're now living for a couple of years in an apartment house. This apartment house is so quiet, you could think no one lives here. There's been very, very little effort for interaction. And I do think that some of that is tied into the pandemic, and the people were home a lot, alone, and it does leave some residual feelings and anxiety about getting sick. It's complicated. But anyway, let's see if I can quickly find. I don't think this book will do it. I'm going to go back to this first little book because so many things in here are quick. And easy to talk about. In fact, I'm going to tell you a little story that I know is in this book, but to make it fast and easy. There was a boy who was in school in Europe, in one of the places where Jewish people lived. And he was living in a school, the boys often did by the time they were 12 or 13. And he admired his rabbi so, so much, but he wanted to know more about him. However, it wasn't the kind of situation where you could just say, Rabbi, I want to know you, tell me things. Very formal living. So he started to secretly follow the rabbi around, hiding behind trees and stuff, seeing where he was going. And he knew that the rabbi took a break like midday, and he thought maybe he goes home, he eats lunch, he takes a nap. He didn't know. So he followed him. And one day, this is what happened. He didn't, he was able to keep seeing him, and he followed him, and he saw he was going out to a main road, such as roads were, 150 years ago. And that puzzled him because he thought he'd be going home to lunch or to rest. And he saw that along the road came a working class man, a man just aged with the trauma of lifting things and pushing things and, the struggle of life. And the guy wasn't Jewish, he could tell. They all, each group knew each other. And the guy was pushing a really heavy wagon, which he could manage along the street. But now there was a little hill that comes up. And what he saw, he was shocked. He saw this very, very prestigious rabbi, all dressed in this black cloak and stuff, move off of the edge of the street, come into where the guy was coming with his cart like a dance, pick up one end of the side of the cart, and the guy was on the other side. And together, they pushed that cart up the hill. And then the rabbi just moved away from him like in the end of a dance. That was the secret life of the rabbi.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. It is, because so much of life is being able to do a dance, whether it's secret or not, with someone else who needs it, or just that you both need it together, whatever. So that's our story, and that's our night for tonight. So
Thank you for inviting me to stay. It was a wonderful show, and you seem like a phenomenally wonderful person. And I'm looking forward to the next time Barbara has you on.
yes,
I look forward to being on again with the both of you, and it's always a pleasure to be here and spend.
and want to tell people how to reach you, please go ahead.
Well, you can reach me at my website, Better Health Through Movement at gmail.com. Through is spelled THROUGH. So it's Better Health Through Movement, one word, at gmail.com. Happy to meet people, discuss and thank both. Enjoyed it as always.
And you can always find me at the Enchanted Self website. And if you want to write to me at barbara.holstein@gmail.com, that's fine. And I will answer you unless you sound too weird, so I get scared. So, but otherwise, I respect you and I'll answer. So good night for now.
Good night,
Good night.
everybody. Thanks to
Good
all our
night.
wonderful listeners. This will be up on YouTube tomorrow, and then it will spread and be available on several sites. Thank you to Barbara. Everyone, whether you clicked on a link and found yourself here, whether you called and you're patient waiting in our queue, or whether you're going to check us out later on demand, until next time, this is us wishing you joyous journeys and amazing adventures, as well as a happy and a healthy new year.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.